My sister-in-law demanded that my husband kick me out of the house because my presence disgusted her and my husband. To please her, yelled at me to go to the village, to my mother's house, saying it would only be for a few days. But I, tired of so much manipulation, revealed something to him that made him tremble. If there's anything worse than a cold breakfast, it's realizing that your husband considers you a stranger in your own home. Tatiana sank her spoon into her bowl of oatmeal without really paying attention. Steam rose in soft swirls, but her mind was elsewhere. Mornings used to be her little refuge, the only time of day when she could enjoy a hot cup of coffee without interruptions, when she could imagine herself in another life, one where she didn't have to walk on broken glass inside her own home. But that day, something in the air felt different. Sergio, sitting across from her, nervously stirred his coffee. He moved the spoon inside the cup with no real purpose, as if his only intention was to avoid his wife's gaze. He took a deep breath, but even then, his voice came out shaky. "Honey, get ready quickly. My mother and sister are coming tomorrow." Tatiana blinked, still groggy, not fully understanding why he seemed so uneasy. It wasn't the first time Lucero and Liza had come to visit, and although their encounters were always tense, her husband had never acted like this before. She murmured, taking another sip of her coffee. Sergio swallowed hard and continued, this time in a lower voice, almost as if he wished she wouldn't hear him. "And they don't want to feel your presence." The coffee got stuck in her throat. She set her cup down with a loud thud on the table and stared at him. She must have misheard. "Excuse me?" Sergio placed his spoon on the saucer with a metallic clink. He didn't dare lift his eyes. His fingers tapped against the table, a clear sign that he himself was uncomfortable with his own words. But he had already started, and there was no turning back. "It's nothing personal. It's just that, you know." He took a breath. "Liza is pregnant, and, well, she says your presence makes her nauseous. It's only for a few days." A tense silence filled the kitchen. The morning sunlight filtered through the window, illuminating the scene as if nothing were wrong, as if the world weren't about to explode within those four walls. Tatiana let out a dry, humorless laugh. Of course. Because your sister's comfort is more important than mine." Her gaze hardened, but her voice remained cold. "And guess what? I'm pregnant too." Sergio turned pale. His lips barely parted, as if he had lost the ability to breathe for a whole second. The room seemed to shrink around him. "What?" "You heard me. But I suppose my pregnancy doesn't count, right? Because here, the only thing that matters is what your mother and sister want." The blow landed perfectly. Tatiana could see how her husband processed the information, how his mind scrambled to find a way out of the trap he had walked straight into. But there was no way out. She had him cornered. Sergio shifted in his seat. "It's not that. It's just that. It's just that if my presence bothers Liza, then I'm the one who has to leave." Her tone was no longer cold. Now it burned. Sergio clenched his fists on the table. Guilt and discomfort were written all over his face like ink on paper. But even so, he tried to justify the unjustifiable. "Tati, try to understand. My mother and sister are my family. And what am I? The woman you sleep with and can throw away when it's convenient? Your maid?" She leaned her elbows on the table and looked at him with fierce intensity. "Do you know what it's like to live with the constant feeling that you'll always be last on the priority list? Because I swear to you, Sergio, I'm getting tired of it." Sergio ran a hand over his face, frustrated. He wasn't ready for this fight. He never was. He had expected his wife to be angry, sure, but not for her to throw such a bombshell right in his face. "That's not what I meant," he tried to say. "But that's what you did." The temperature in the room seemed to rise by several degrees. The air was thick, as if the very oxygen had turned into gunpowder, waiting for a spark to ignite it. Tatiana slowly stood up, placing her hands on the table. "Let me guess. If I said that your mother and sister's presence bothers me, it would be me who would have to leave, right?" Sergio didn't answer. And his silence was the worst answer of all. Tatiana laughed, but this time, there was no trace of humor in her expression. She walked around the table with slow steps, like a predator stalking its prey. How convenient, right? If they want something, you rush to grant their wish. But if I want respect in my own house, I'm the one being dramatic. It's not that simple. Sergio's voice sounded almost pleading. Oh, but it is. It's very simple. Either you respect me as the woman you married, or you find someone who's willing to be trampled. Because I won't allow it. Sergio's heart was pounding loudly in his ears. His breath was uneven. He was losing control of the situation faster than he'd anticipated. Tatiana looked at him steadily and delivered the final blow. If Liza can't stand my presence, then you'll be the one to take care of everything while they're here. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Cooking, cleaning, serving them, dealing with each of their whims. Tati, I don't care what you think. I care about what you'll do. Their eyes met in a silent duel. Sergio felt the world turning against him. His mother and sister wouldn't accept this. And worse, he wasn't sure he could bear this burden. But he no longer had a choice. Because, for the first time in a long time, Tatiana wasn't willing to back down. Sergio hadn't slept a wink all night. The clock on the nightstand read 6 in the morning, but the feeling that time had stopped gnawed at him from the inside. He felt trapped in a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. He turned his head and looked at his wife, sleeping beside him, her breathing calm, her face serene. How could she be so at peace after what had happened the night before? He shifted in the bed heavily, feeling the guilt swirl in his chest. Not only did he have to deal with his mother and sister, but now he also had to process the bombshell Tatiana had dropped on him. She was pregnant. Why hadn't she told him earlier? Why did he have to find out in the middle of an argument? A whisper of anger coursed through his body. He jumped out of bed and walked to the kitchen. He needed to do something with his hands to calm himself down. If they didn't talk about this now, the resentment would grow like a poisonous vine. He opened the fridge roughly and grabbed the ingredients for breakfast. The plan was simple: prove to Tatiana that he could handle everything. If she didn't want to take care of her family, he would. There was just one problem. He had no idea how to cook. The eggs broke in his hand before he could get them to the pan. The bread burned in seconds, leaving a smell of charcoal in the air. The bacon was raw inside and charred outside. One disaster after another, and the pressure in his chest kept rising. You really are pathetic. Tatiana's voice startled him. He turned and saw her leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, a mocking smile on her lips. Her hair was still messy from sleep, and her face was slightly swollen from just waking up, but her eyes shone with that challenging look that always threw him off. Don't start, Tati. What happened, honey? You said you'd do everything, right? So come on, move it. She waved her hand as if she were training a dog. Sergio dropped the spatula on the counter forcefully and turned to face her, fists clenched. That's not what bothers me. Tatiana raised an eyebrow. Oh, no? Then what? Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant? His voice came out louder than he intended. A contained roar that filled the kitchen with tension. She blinked slowly, unfazed. I only found out a few days ago. And why didn't you tell me right away? Oh, sorry for not announcing it with trumpets and confetti. She crossed her arms with sarcasm. Do you really think this was the best time to bring it up? Sergio ran a hand over his face, frustrated. He knew she was right, but that didn't calm him at all. Tati, this is serious. I'm going to be a father. I deserve to know before you used it as a weapon in an argument. I didn't use it as a weapon. I just told you when you needed to hear it the most. Do you think it's normal for me to find out something like this in the middle of a fight? Oh, and what did you want? For me to tell you over a romantic dinner with scented candles while you sent me to your mom's house like I was an old piece of furniture? Sergio felt a chill. Yeah, that had been his plan. He wanted to take her to his mother's house, get her away from the storm that was about to hit the house. But now that she said it out loud, it sounded like the worst idea in the world. I just thought it would be better for you. That you'd be more at peace there. Tatiana laughed, but there was no joy in her laugh. Sure, Sergio. Very thoughtful of you. You wanted me to leave so I wouldn't bother your sister. That's not caring about me, that's getting rid of me. Before Sergio could respond, the doorbell rang. The color drained from his face. Lucero and Liza had arrived. He took a deep breath and walked toward the door with 10 steps. He slowly opened it and was faced with the imposing figure of his mother and his sister's arrogant silhouette, her hand placed theatrically on her belly. Lucero raised an eyebrow and kissed him on the cheek with a calculated smile. "Son, what a joy to see you." Liza rubbed her belly and frowned. "Ugh. Since I walked in, I feel something strange in the air. It's like something's rotten in here." Tatiana watched them from the kitchen with a cynical smile. She didn't move an inch to greet them. Lucero froze when she saw her. "Oh, you're still here." Tatiana tilted her head. "Yes. Any problem?" Lucero clicked her tongue and headed for the table, but stopped when she saw the food. She wrinkled her nose in disgust. "What the hell is this?" Sergio tried to smile. "I made breakfast." Liza looked at her plate and then at her mother, horrified. "Is this a joke? I'm not eating this crap. Not even a dog would eat this." Tatiana calmly walked over and grabbed a burnt toast. She took a bite and chewed slowly, never breaking her gaze from her mother-in-law. "It's not that bad." Lucero turned to her with a look of pure disdain. "And you? Still doing nothing? Just sitting there like a beached whale. I'm not surprised you've gained so much weight. You look like a piñata full of flour. How much weight have you gained?" Sergio felt the air freeze. Liza let out a little giggle, covering her mouth with her hand. Tatiana continued chewing without blinking. After swallowing, she tilted her head thoughtfully. "You know what the best part is, Lucero? Here in my house, I can do whatever I want. And if I want to sit all day, I will." Lucero gritted her teeth in fury. "You're lazy, shameless. I don't know how my son puts up with you. You should be grateful we accepted you into this family." Tatiana leaned toward her with a calmness that only made the situation more unbearable. "Think?" She let out a low laugh. "I have nothing to thank for. I didn't come here to beg for your approval, much less to serve you. I'm no one's maid. If you don't like it, the door is wide open." Lucero trembled with rage. Liza took a dramatic breath and looked at Sergio with victim's eyes. "Sergio, are you going to allow this woman to treat us this way? After everything we've done for you?" Sergio felt how each word weighed heavily on his shoulders. His mother and sister were looking at him with demands. Tatiana watched him with a raised eyebrow, waiting for his response. And for the first time in his life, he felt like he was on the verge of a decision that would change everything. Sergio felt like a man stuck in quicksand. The more he tried to stand firm, the more the chaos surrounding him consumed him. The air in the house had become unbearable. The tension was so thick it felt like an invisible knife cutting through every word, every glance, every tiny gesture. Lucero was sitting on the couch with a straight back, lips pursed with that gesture of disdain she had been perfecting for years. Liza, reclining with one hand on her belly, would occasionally sigh dramatically, as if her pregnancy gave her the right to dictate the rules of the house. And then there was Tatiana, arms crossed, head held high, challenging the family with her mere presence. Sergio felt the weight of all those gazes on him. He knew what was coming. He had lived through it countless times before. His mother never let a confrontation end without ensuring he understood his role. And his role had always been the same: obey. Lucero took a deep breath and let out an exaggerated sigh, making sure her frustration was well noticed. "Son, how much longer are you going to allow this?" Sergio closed his eyes for a second. He already knew what she meant by that. It wasn't a question, it was an order disguised as a plea. "Allow what, Mom?" he replied tiredly. Lucero turned her face toward Tatiana with a venomous look. This lack of respect. This woman thinks she can do and say whatever she wants in my presence. I didn't raise a man to be the laughingstock of his wife. Tatiana let out a joyless laugh. "Oh, no, of course not. You raised him to be your little dog." Lucero turned her head so quickly that for a moment Sergio thought she might have hurt herself. His mother was never someone who tolerated disrespect without retaliating. And he knew that this would be brutal. "Little dog?" "No, dear, I raised him to be a real man, something that clearly you're incapable of appreciating." And look at you. You seem like a burden, a lazy woman who knows how to move her mouth but does nothing useful. What good is a woman to my son who doesn't even know how to take care of her home?" Tatiana placed her hands on her hips with a sarcastic smile. "I don't know, Lucero. What good is a man who doesn't know how to defend himself and has to run to mommy to be protected?" Sergio felt the blow as though it had landed on him. Liza, who had up until that moment been enjoying the spectacle like it was theater, decided to intervene. "Oh, please, Tatiana. Don't be so dramatic. Mom is just telling the truth. How do you expect my brother to respect himself if he allows you to treat him like your servant? It's not normal for a man to do everything at home while his wife sits there like..." She paused with a malicious smile, a piñata full of bread and fat. Sergio felt a knot in his stomach. He saw how Tatiana's face tightened, how her jaw clenched, and how her gaze sharpened like a blade. She clenched her fists at her sides, as if she were holding back the anger that was about to explode. "A piñata?" Tatiana slowly tilted her head, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I don't know what surprises me more, the fact that you dared to open your mouth to say such stupidity, or the fact that, even pregnant, you still act like a spoiled little girl." Liza crossed her arms, pretending to look offended. "I'm not spoiled. I'm just saying what everyone is thinking." Lucero nodded approvingly. "Exactly. And besides, look at yourself. You've gained weight, and you don't even have the excuse of pregnancy like Liza. You just sit around doing nothing. You look like a stranded whale in my son's living room." The silence that followed was worse than any scream. Sergio felt the tension crawl across his skin like poison. He saw how his wife's face changed, how her lips curved into a cold smile that didn't promise anything good. Tatiana took a step toward her mother-in-law. "You're right, Lucero. I don't have the excuse of pregnancy to justify gaining weight. But you also don't have the excuse of old age to justify your bitterness, and here you are, spreading poison as if your life depended on it." Lucero stood up suddenly, her eyes blazing with rage. "Don't you dare talk to me like that, ungrateful brat." Tatiana didn't step back. "Ungrateful? Yeah, of course. Because I should be kneeling, thanking you for allowing me to breathe the same air as you, right?" Sergio felt the air grow heavier. His mother was red with fury, his sister was watching with a satisfied smile, and his wife was on the verge of completely losing patience. And in the middle of it all, he felt like a child again, watching his mother fight with his father in the living room of their old house. He remembered the times his father tried to raise his voice against Lucero. He remembered how she always ended up winning, how she always managed to manipulate the situation so it seemed like she was the victim and he the aggressor. He remembered his father's silent tears at night. He remembered how, over the years, that strong and proud man became a shadow of himself until one day he simply stopped trying to defend himself. Sergio swallowed hard. He looked at his mother, then his sister, and finally at his wife. And in that moment, he saw everything clearly. Lucero had never respected his father. And now she was doing the same to him. It wasn't just this argument. It wasn't just this visit. It wasn't just the way she looked at him like he was always disappointing her. It was his whole life. She had always treated him like a child she could control at will. She had always told him what to do, how to do it, who to listen to, and who to ignore. He had always been her puppet. And the worst part was that he had allowed it. Lucero turned toward him, waiting for his intervention. She knew what she wanted. She knew he was supposed to defend her honor, put his wife in her place, remind her who had control. But for the first time in his life, Sergio wasn't afraid of disappointing her. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of every decision he had made up to that point. He looked his mother in the eyes and spoke with a firm voice. "Don't insult my wife again." The silence was absolute. Lucero blinked as if she hadn't heard properly. "What did you say?" Sergio swallowed hard, feeling his heart pound in his chest. "Don't insult her again." Lucero opened her mouth, but no sound came out. For the first time in her life, she seemed to have no ready response. Liza let out an incredulous laugh. "Are you on her side?" Sergio slowly turned to his sister. "It's not about sides. It's about respect." The tension in the room was unbearable. Lucero narrowed her eyes, her face a mix of fury and betrayal. So this is what she's done to you. She's brainwashed you. Sergio shook his head. No, Mom. I just opened my eyes. Minutes later, Lucero entered Liza's room and slammed the door shut. She made sure it was securely closed before turning to her daughter. Liza, one hand on her belly and the other rubbing her temple as if the previous scene had caused her a terrible headache, looked at her with disdain. This can't go on like this, Lucero said, with a furrowed brow and clenched jaw. Your brother is blinded by that woman. Did you hear the way she spoke to me? How she challenged me in front of everyone. She's never done anything like that before. Liza let out a sigh as she settled into the bed. It's Tatiana's fault. That woman has changed Sergio. He used to listen to us. He used to understand that we are his real family. Now he seems like a stranger. Lucero crossed her arms and began pacing back and forth like an animal in a cage. Her thoughts were racing with fury in her mind, trying to find a way to regain control. This won't stay like this, she said firmly. I won't allow some woman to pull us away from Sergio. He's my son. Mine, not hers. Liza watched her closely. Though her mother's poison had always been strong, there was something different in her gaze this time. She was planning something big. What are you going to do, Mom? Lucero stopped and looked at her coldly. What should have been done a long time ago? Sergio has to break up with Tatiana. Liza widened her eyes, and a malicious smile formed on her lips. I like that. Lucero sat on the edge of the bed and took her daughter's hands in hers with a false sweetness that only foretold disaster. Listen to me carefully, Liza. We can't do this directly. Sergio wouldn't listen to us if we told him to divorce. He's too attached to that woman. We have to open his eyes slowly, make him see what she really is. An opportunist, a lazy, a burden pulling him down. Liza nodded enthusiastically. Yes, of course. But how? Lucero narrowed her eyes and let out a cold smile. Sergio is a man of principles. He wants to be a good husband, a good father. If we can make him think Tatiana isn't a good wife or a good mother, he'll start to doubt. And when doubt settles in, everything crumbles. Liza tilted her head. How do we do that? Lucero stroked her chin thoughtfully. We need him to see with his own eyes what she really is. We'll make him realize he can't trust her, that he can't leave his home or his son's future in her hands. Liza frowned. But there's nothing really bad we can use against her. I mean, yes, she's unbearable and lazy, but Sergio doesn't seem to notice. Lucero smiled slyly. Nothing bad yet, but we'll change that. Liza leaned toward her mother, excited. Tell me what to do. Lucero settled into the bed, savoring the feeling of being in control again. First, we need to start with small things. Make Sergio see that Tatiana doesn't care about him. That she doesn't care if he's tired, if he's working hard, if he's suffering. We'll make her seem selfish, like she only thinks about herself. You handle that. Drop comments when he's around, things like, poor my brother, he has to do everything on his own. I wish your wife helped you a little more. Things that'll plant seeds in his mind. Liza smiled maliciously. I love it. Lucero continued, her voice low and venomous. I'll take care of another aspect. We'll make Sergio believe Tatiana isn't a good mother. That she's irresponsible, that she doesn't take care of her pregnancy, that she's not ready to raise a child. Liza chuckled. We could say we saw her drinking coffee excessively, or that she doesn't eat properly. We could exaggerate anything she does to make it look like she doesn't care about the baby. Lucero nodded. Exactly. And if we manage to make Sergio start doubting her, if we manage to make him see what we want him to see, he'll separate. And then he'll come back to us where he belongs. Mother and daughter exchanged a knowing look. The plan was in motion. After a few minutes, they decided to leave the room. The first phase of their strategy was simple. Act normal, pretend everything was fine, that they accepted the situation. Sergio shouldn't suspect anything. Lucero opened the door and walked out with her chin held high, her mask of concerned mother perfectly in place. But after taking 2 steps in the hallway, she froze. Tatiana was there, standing with her arms crossed and a cold expression on her face. Her eyes gleamed with silent danger. Lucero felt a chill. How much had she heard? Tatiana tilted her head slowly, making the atmosphere even more tense. Well. Her voice was soft, but with a dangerous edge. What a lovely family moment. Lucero tried to compose herself. She couldn't afford to appear weak. What are you doing here? Tatiana gave her a sarcastic smile. I could ask you the same thing, although it's unnecessary. I already know what you were doing. Liza tried to feign indifference. You have no idea what you're talking about. Tatiana let out a low, cold laugh. Of course I do. You were planning how to separate me from Sergio, how to make him see me as the worst wife in the world. Oh, and also how to convince him I won't be a good mother. Very creative, I must admit. Lucero felt a slight tremor in her hands but hid it. Don't talk nonsense. No one is conspiring against you. Tatiana stared at her and stepped forward, closing the distance between them. You know what's the best part of all this? I'm not going to do exactly what you expect. I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to make a scene. I'm not going to give Sergio the chance to think I'm the villain of the story. Lucero narrowed her eyes. Then what do you plan to do? Tatiana smiled. I'll play my own card. Liza scoffed. Please, what could you possibly do? Tatiana leaned slightly toward her. Oh, dear Liza, you have no idea what I'm capable of. Lucero felt a chill run down her skin. For the first time, she was scared. Tatiana didn't look away from Lucero or Liza. She knew the fear in their eyes was real, but she also knew it wouldn't last long before they composed themselves. Women like them didn't allow themselves to be vulnerable for more than a few seconds. Lucero pressed her lips together, straightening her back with a haughty posture. Her calculating mind was surely already working on how to turn the situation to her advantage, how to make Sergio doubt his wife, see her as a manipulator, as the threat they wanted him to believe she was. Tatiana took a deep breath. She had no intention of playing their game. She wouldn't confront them with shouting or arguments. She wouldn't raise her voice. She wouldn't lose control. No, she would destroy them from within. That night, the house was filled with a deceptive calm. The tense atmosphere still hung in the air, but no one mentioned the confrontation in the hallway. Sergio, exhausted, tried to focus on anything else while preparing dinner. He wanted to believe that if he ignored the conflict, it would eventually disappear. Tatiana had other plans. She entered the kitchen with an air of calm, walked over to her husband, and wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head on his back. Sergio tensed up instinctively, surprised by the unexpected show of affection. What are you doing? His voice sounded uncertain. Tatiana smiled against his skin. Helping you. I want this evening to be nice for everyone. Sergio turned his head to glance at her sideways, as if trying to figure out what she was plotting. Really? Of course. I don't want any more problems, darling. I'm tired of fighting. Sergio didn't respond immediately. Something felt off, but the softness in his wife's voice left him confused. When they finished preparing dinner, Tatiana took it upon herself to set the table with a serene smile, as if she were truly enjoying the moment. Lucero and Liza arrived a few minutes later, and upon seeing her like this, they froze for a moment. They hadn't expected this behavior. Lucero squinted. She was suspicious. Liza, on the other hand, seemed more annoyed than confused. She had expected Tatiana to explode, to be defensive, to create a bad impression in front of Sergio. But what she saw before her was a completely different version of the woman she knew. Dinner began in tense silence. Sergio couldn't stop glancing at his wife, expecting the conflict to spark at any moment. But Tatiana remained unfazed. She took her plate, served herself some salad, and smiled at her mother-in-law sweetly. Lucero, you should try this. I'm sure you'll love it. Lucero hesitated for a few seconds. She was used to her daughter-in-law's sharp replies, the constant tension between them, the verbal battles that had become an everyday occurrence. But now Tatiana was smiling at her gently, with a politeness that made no sense. Did you make this? She asked suspiciously. No, Sergio did, Tatiana replied, squeezing her husband's hand. He's an excellent cook, don't you think? Lucero blinked, trying to figure out what was happening. Liza rolled her eyes. Now you're acting like this? It's so obvious you're pretending. Tatiana elegantly brought a napkin to her mouth and sighed with a serene expression. I don't know what you're talking about, Liza. I just want us to have a peaceful dinner. Sergio swallowed hard. He was about to say something, but stopped. He didn't know where he stood right now. Lucero straightened up and wiped her mouth with her napkin before speaking. Since you're so open to dialogue, tell me something, Tatiana. Don't you think a good wife should make sure her husband doesn't have to cook after a long day of work? Tatiana smiled and nodded. Of course, Lucero. You're right. Sergio quickly turned his head towards his wife with a furrowed brow. Really? His voice sounded incredulous. Yes, darling. Tatiana interlaced her fingers on the table. My mother-in-law is right. A good wife should handle all the household chores. In fact, she should make sure her husband doesn't have to worry about anything. Lucero raised her chin with satisfaction. Finally, it seemed her daughter-in-law understood her place. Exactly, she said in a victorious tone. Tatiana smiled at her kindly. And since we're on this topic, a good mother should teach her son to be independent. To cook, to clean, not to depend on a woman to do everything for him. Lucero opened her mouth but was left speechless. Sergio felt a strange tingling in his neck. The way Tatiana was handling everything was confusing him. There was no anger in her tone, nor any evident sarcasm, but each word carried a calculated weight. Liza, unable to hold herself back, forcefully dropped her fork on her plate. This is ridiculous. Mom is right, Sergio shouldn't be doing these things. Tatiana tilted her head and looked at her with feigned sweetness. Liza, darling, you're saying that men shouldn't do housework. But tell me, don't you want your son to grow up knowing how to take care of himself? Or would you rather he depend on a woman his whole life? Liza was speechless. Lucero pursed her lips, feeling cornered. Sergio leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of the conversation fall on him. For years, his mother had instilled certain ideas in him, certain rules about what a man should do and what a woman should do. He'd never really questioned them. But now, as he watched how his wife handled the situation calmly, as he watched his mother and sister fall silent, for the first time, he noticed how ridiculous it all sounded. Lucero didn't give up. She never lost. Sergio, my son, tell me the truth. Do you like this life? Do you like coming home from work and having to do all these things? Do you really think this is the right thing? Sergio looked at his mother. Then he looked at his wife, and then he saw everything clearly. Tatiana never forced him to do anything. She never had. He had made the decision to cook, clean, and help around the house, not because his wife manipulated him, but because this was his home too. Because it was his responsibility. Because the right thing was to share the load. And his mother. His mother had spent her whole life teaching him that men should be served, that women should sacrifice themselves, that if a woman didn't devote herself entirely to a man, she wasn't a good wife. Sergio felt sick. He had been blind for so long. Lucero waited for his response impatiently. Sergio took a breath and exhaled slowly. Mom, you're wrong. Lucero felt as if she had been slapped in the face. What did you say? Sergio looked at his mother with strange calm in his eyes. You've always told me how my life should be, how my marriage should be, but you never asked me what I wanted. Lucero felt an emptiness in her stomach. Her son was slipping out of her control. Tatiana intertwined her fingers and smiled softly. She knew her game was working. Liza, with a flushed face, looked at her mother, hoping she would do something. But for the first time, Lucero had no words. Tatiana leaned back in her chair, quietly enjoying her victory. Lucero's empire was beginning to crumble. Lucero felt like her world was falling apart. Her son, her own son, had told her to her face that she was wrong. After years of teaching him what was right, after molding him to her will, after making sure he always depended on her guidance, Sergio had dared to defy her. What annoyed her most wasn't just that he had done it, but that he had done it for that woman. For Tatiana. Dinner continued, but the atmosphere grew tenser. Tatiana continued eating with a calm expression, as if she hadn't enjoyed every second of Lucero and Liza's discomfort. Sergio, for his part, felt like something inside him was cracking. He had spent so long justifying his mother's behavior that he had never stopped to analyze what it really meant. Liza, who had remained in uncomfortable silence until now, put her fork down and let out a theatrical sigh. Sergio, seriously, don't you get it? Her voice had a melancholic tone, as if she was about to burst into tears. We only want what's best for you. Mom has always done everything for you. She's always been there to support you, to give you her love. And now, the way you treat us. Sergio didn't respond immediately. He studied his sister closely, watching every gesture, every inflection in her voice. For the first time in his life, he saw the act for what it truly was. Tatiana smiled softly and wiped the corner of her lips with her napkin before speaking. How touching, Liza. Seriously, you almost made me shed a tear. Liza shot her a fiery look. And what do you know? You don't have any siblings, you don't know what family love is. Tatiana let out a soft laugh and turned her gaze to Sergio. That's interesting, don't you think, love? According to Liza, family love consists of manipulating, humiliating, controlling. Lucero pressed her lips tightly together. Enough. Her voice was sharp. I don't have to sit here and be disrespected by some random person. Sergio felt a tingling in his hands. Mom, don't call her that. Lucero stared at him. Since when did you become so soft? Sergio frowned. Soft? Why? Because I'm asking you not to insult my wife? Liza crossed her arms and huffed. It's not just that. You've changed, Sergio. You weren't like this before. You used to protect us. Now you seem like a different person. Sergio carefully set his fork on the table. You know what really bothers me? That my whole life, I've been made to feel like everything I do is out of obligation. That if I do something you don't like, it's because I'm against you. That if I try to live my life my way, then I'm the enemy. Lucero narrowed her eyes. And that woman is the one who put those ideas in your head. Sergio shook his head. No, Mom. I put them in my own head when I opened my eyes. Liza looked at him like he had said something monstrous. Are you blaming us for something? Sergio took a deep breath. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just seeing things as they are. Lucero suddenly stood up from the table, making the chair scrape across the floor. I'm not going to listen to this. Not after everything I've done for you. Sergio also stood up, feeling a strange sense of freedom spread through his body. And what have you done for me, Mom? Lucero blinked. How do you ask that? I gave you life. I raised you, I protected you. I made sure you had everything you needed. Yes, and you also made sure I never made my own decisions. Lucero felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. Liza covered her mouth with her hand, as if she had just witnessed a crime. Tatiana, on the other hand, smiled with satisfaction. That's the smartest thing you've said all night, love. Lucero felt her anger blind her. Is this how you repay me? After all the sacrifices I made for you? Sergio crossed his arms. Sacrifices? What sacrifices, Mom? The sacrifice of controlling me? Of making me feel like I could never make a decision without your approval? Liza intervened, her voice breaking. How can you talk to Mom like that? Sergio looked at her coldly. Because it's the first time I actually see her. The silence that followed was unbearable. Lucero looked at him with a mix of disbelief and contained rage. You're ungrateful. Sergio felt an emptiness in his chest. No, Mom. I'm just stopping being your obedient son. Tatiana calmly stood up from the table and took her plate. All right. Since we're done with tonight's little play, I'll take the plates to the kitchen. Lucero shot her a glare. You think this is over? Tatiana turned with a dangerous smile. No, Lucero. I think this is just the beginning. Lucero felt a shiver run down her spine. For the first time in her life, she didn't have control. The silence was a ticking time bomb. Lucero stood in the living room, her fists clenched and jaw tight. Liza, beside her, looked at her with eyes full of repressed anger. Sergio felt a knot in his throat, a sense that something was about to explode, and once it did, there would be no going back. Lucero took a deep breath, as if holding her fury in one last time before delivering the final sentence. Her voice came out in a cold whisper, but strong enough to freeze the blood of everyone in the room. Choose. Sergio frowned. What? Lucero stepped forward, chin raised, her gaze filled with contempt. Choose, Sergio. Who do you owe your loyalty to? Your mother and sister, who have taken care of you your whole life? Or that woman who has only pushed you away from us? Liza grabbed his hand tightly, as if begging him to make the right choice. Sergio felt an unbearable pressure in his chest. I'm not going to choose. That's not the point. Lucero laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement, it was pure bitterness. Oh, yes, it is about that. Because since that woman entered your life, you've changed. You're no longer the son I raised. Sergio shook his head. No, Mom. I've stopped being your puppet. The air grew thick, the tension unbearable. Lucero gritted her teeth, and her voice became lower, sharper. You're ungrateful. I've always protected you, always been there for you. But not anymore. Sergio felt a chill. What do you mean by that? Lucero smiled, but her eyes were filled with something dark, something Sergio had never seen before. I'm tired of pretending you're a good son, of lying about what really happened. Sergio felt like the ground was shaking beneath his feet. What are you talking about? Lucero let out a sigh and looked at him harshly. Have you ever wondered why your father died? Sergio felt his body tense. You always said it was an accident. Lucero nodded slowly. It was, but not the way you think. The air stopped. Sergio felt his heart pounding loudly in his ears. Lucero took a deep breath and said the words that would destroy everything. It was your fault. Sergio felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. What? Lucero narrowed her eyes. That day, you were 5 years old. I let go of you for 1 second, just 1 second, and you ran into the street like a silly child, not thinking about anything. Sergio's stomach churned. Mom, your father saw you. And when he saw that a car was coming straight at you, he ran to save you. But he didn't make it. The car hit him. The silence was deafening. Sergio felt his throat close. No. Lucero looked at him with an expression that mixed sadness and anger. I always knew the truth, but I decided to hide it from you. Because you were just a child, because you wouldn't have been able to live with that guilt. But now that I see what you've become, I don't care about protecting you anymore. Sergio felt like the world was collapsing around him. His whole life, he had believed that his father's death was a tragedy, something inevitable. But now, his mother was telling him it was all his fault. Tatiana watched the scene in silence, not missing a single detail. She knew what Lucero was trying to do. She was using the truth as a weapon, trying to break Sergio from the inside, to make him vulnerable again, to bring him back under her control. Sergio felt his hands shaking. Is that why you've always treated me this way? Is that why you've always manipulated me? Lucero didn't answer immediately. Sergio felt a burning in his chest, as if something inside him was burning. Is that why you always made me feel like I owed you something? Lucero lifted her chin. Because you did owe me. Sergio felt the rage rise like an uncontrollable wave. You silently blamed me my whole life for something I didn't even remember? Lucero let out a bitter laugh. What other choice did I have? Sergio clenched his fists. You're a monster. Lucero looked at him coldly. I'm a mother who did what she had to do. Sergio felt everything inside him break. You were never a mother. Lucero felt the air leaving her. Shut up. You always treated me like I was an unpaid debt, like I had to pay for something I didn't even remember. You don't understand anything. The only thing I understand is that you've always manipulated me. Because if I hadn't, you would have wasted your life the way you're doing now. Lucero felt her heart pounding. The room was spinning. Liza quickly stood up. Mom. Lucero felt a sudden dizziness. Sergio. Sergio frowned. What? Lucero tried to speak, but her body no longer responded. Her vision blurred. And before she could say anything more, she collapsed to the floor. Liza screamed. Mom. Sergio felt a knot in his stomach. Tatiana slowly approached, but Liza knelt beside her mother and lifted her head with desperation. "Mom, wake up." Sergio felt an emptiness in his chest. Liza looked at him, her face covered in tears, and her voice came out heart-wrenching. "Now you want to kill her? First Dad, now Mom." Sergio felt the world darken around him. And at that moment, he knew that nothing would ever be the same. Hours later, the hospital had that sterile smell of disinfectant and suppressed illness. Sergio stood in front of the door to the room where they had admitted his mother, his jaw clenched and his heart pounding in his chest. Liza was beside him, hugging herself, her face still stained with dried tears. She wasn't speaking to him, not even looking at him. Since the paramedics took Lucero, she had become a statue of resentment. Tatiana was a little further back, saying nothing. She had no intention of getting too close, not at a moment where every breath Sergio took felt like a minefield. She knew her husband was broken inside, that in his mind, the revelation his mother had made to him before collapsing kept repeating over and over. And now, in a twist of fate that seemed cruel and even ironic, Lucero was in a hospital bed, her life depending on something no one in that house could control. A doctor came out of the room, checking his chart with an expression that didn't bode well. "Family of Mrs. Lucero Ramirez?" Sergio looked up, feeling the weight of the question on his shoulders. "Yes, I'm her son. How is she?" The doctor cleared his throat. The crisis was caused by a sharp rise in blood pressure, but that's not the only issue. We ran some tests and found something more concerning. Liza grabbed Sergio's arm tightly. "What does my mom have?" The doctor sighed. "Your mother has advanced heart disease. It's a problem that should have been treated a long time ago, but according to the tests, it seems she never sought medical help. Constant stress has worsened her condition. If she doesn't follow immediate treatment, the next episode could be fatal." Sergio felt a lump in his throat. "Did she know about it?" The doctor nodded gravely. "Everything points to yes. She had been ignoring the symptoms for a long time. It's possible she felt dizziness, extreme fatigue, chest pains. But for some reason, she never sought help." Liza covered her mouth with both hands, holding back a sob. Sergio closed his eyes tightly. His mother had known and never said anything. Why? Out of pride? Not wanting to appear weak? To continue maintaining her image of a strong, indestructible woman? The doctor looked at them with understanding. "Right now, your mother is stable, but she needs absolute rest. We will also conduct more tests to rule out other issues." Sergio nodded stiffly. "Thank you, doctor." The doctor gestured for them to enter and walked down the hall. Liza was the first to enter the room. Lucero was lying down with her eyes closed, connected to a monitor that was recording the rhythm of her heart. Her lips were pale, her face more fragile than ever. The image didn't match the dominant woman who, until that very night, had been dictating the rules of her house. Now she looked nothing more than a tired old woman, defeated by her own body. Sergio felt something strange inside of him. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was a mix of anger and sadness. His whole life had been dominated by his mother. He had grown up in her shadow, carrying a weight he hadn't even understood until a few hours ago. Now he saw her like this, fragile, defenseless. And he didn't know what to feel. Liza approached the bed and gently took her hand. "Mom, we're here." Lucero slowly opened her eyes. She looked exhausted, but not surprised to see them. She looked at her daughter first, then at Sergio. Her gaze hardened for a moment before fading. She didn't have the strength to hold on to her anger. Sergio cleared his throat. "Mom, why didn't you say anything?" Lucero turned her gaze away, as if the question bothered her more than her own illness. "I didn't have to." Sergio felt a chill. Even now, she refused to admit her vulnerability. Liza pressed her lips together, still with tears in her eyes. "Mom, the doctor said this is serious. You need treatment." Lucero closed her eyes for a moment and sighed. "I don't want to spend my last years in a hospital." Sergio felt the anger rising in his throat again. "Your last years? Mom, you can get treatment. You can get better." Lucero smiled bitterly. "And for what?" To keep watching my son turn his back on me? Sergio felt his patience was running out. This isn't about me. It's about your life. Lucero opened her eyes again, this time with a sharper look. And why do you care now? Wasn't it you who hated me a few hours ago? Sergio felt his body tense. I don't hate you, but I can't keep letting you manipulate me. Lucero laughed weakly. And what are you going to do? Let me die? Liza glared at him in anger. Mom's right. If something happens to her, it will be your fault. Sergio ran a hand across his face, feeling exhaustion take over him. Stop saying that, Liza. Not everything is my fault. Lucero stared at him, something dark in her eyes. Not true? And our father? Sergio felt like a knife had been driven into his chest. Enough. Lucero squinted. Does the truth hurt, son? Sergio felt his heart pounding in his chest. You know what? I'm tired. I'm tired of everything that happens in this family ending up being my fault. I'm tired of you using the past to control me. Lucero looked at him coldly. And I'm tired of seeing what you've become. Liza sobbed and hid her face in her hands. Please, don't fight. Tatiana, who had been silent until then, finally stepped closer. Lucero, I don't know how much longer you think you can keep manipulating this. But I assure you, this game is already over. Lucero looked at her with hatred, but she didn't have the strength to argue. Sergio took a deep breath. I will pay for your treatment, Mom. But if you choose not to do it, that's your decision. Lucero pursed her lips. I don't need your money. Sergio nodded. Then you don't need my guilt either. A heavy silence fell. Liza looked at him as if she couldn't believe what he was saying. What do you mean? Sergio looked at his mother, and in his eyes there was no fear, no guilt. Just a decision made. I'm not going to carry this burden anymore. If Mom wants to live, she will live. And if she doesn't want to, that's her decision too. But I'm not going to keep letting her control me with her illness. Lucero looked at him coldly. You'll regret this. Sergio held her gaze. Maybe, but it will be my decision, not yours. Liza sobbed. You're a monster. Sergio looked at his sister, but said nothing. Tatiana took his hand. Let's go. Sergio took a deep breath and nodded. As they walked down the hall, for the first time in his life, he felt free. Weeks passed, then months and later years. Sergio's life changed completely after that night in the hospital. There were no goodbyes, no attempts at reconciliation. He simply decided to walk away. He didn't want any more chains tied to his life. He didn't want to keep carrying guilt that wasn't his. Tatiana and he focused on what was most important, their family. The birth of their son was the definitive proof that he had made the right decision. He became a present man, a loving father, a husband who protected his wife and home. He promised himself he would never let his son grow up with the burden of conditional love like he had. Lucero and Liza became a distant memory. There were no calls, no visits, no apologies. Nothing. Sergio didn't want to hear from them anymore, nor did he allow the ghost of his past to interfere with the peace of his home. But despite everything, he never stopped sending money to his mother every month so she could pay for her treatment. He didn't do it out of obligation or guilt. He did it because, despite everything, she was still his mother. He never received a thank you, never knew if she used the money for her treatment or if she wasted it. And he didn't care. It was no longer his problem. The only thing that mattered to him was the life he had built with Tatiana and their son. A life free of yelling, manipulation, invisible chains. A life where he could finally breathe without the shadow of his past lurking around every corner. And for the first time in his life, Sergio was truly happy. If you enjoyed this story, I invite you to leave a comment about how you felt listening to it. And if you've gone through a similar situation of deceit, I'd love to hear your valuable opinion. I'd be honored if you leave a like, share the video with a friend or family member, and subscribe to the channel. Don't miss the next surprising story showing up on your screen right now. We have entertainment guaranteed just for you. See you in the next video.